The Star Wars universe continues to expand as now we follow the most famous bounty hunter in the galaxy. This is my review of Episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. Picking up right after where we left off with the post-credit scene of The Mandalorian Season 2, Boba Fett holds court, cementing himself as the new crime lord of Tattooine. Now, before I really get started with my review for this episode, I want to know your thoughts on it, so drop them down there in the comments below and start the conversation, because that's always the most important part. And while you're down there, if you enjoy what you see here and you like movies and TV, this is the place to be, so make sure you click that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversation on your favorite movies and TV. This will also be a spoiler review, as we always do for these big franchise shows. And I was excited for the Boba Fett show as a Star Wars fan. I was coming into the show and I was enjoying seeing the trailers that they've given us and the Godfather-like vibes, and Boba Fett trying to establish himself as this figure of power. And this first episode is pretty much that, but it also glances back at flashbacks, because this whole episode is very introspective, and we learn the whole thing of how Boba Fett survived the whole Sarlacc pit thing. We see him escape and whatnot. We see him being very resourceful about it, and he's remembering all these things as he's in this back-to-bath, curing himself, which shows that there are still some physical wounds that he needs to constantly take care of. The thing I like the most in this episode is how it presents Boba's perspective. The more the show goes on, the more into it we'll get, where we see that he's served all kinds of people throughout his life, from where he was a bounty hunter, and when we see in this episode he was eventually a prisoner of the Tusken Raiders, and eventually he helped the Tusken Raiders. He had mercy on them. There was this humanity within him. We see him at his lowest, and now that he is in this position of power, but still has people after him, I think he's coming from this place where he will not serve anyone else but himself. He will not ever have another boss. And I like that because it shows us in a lot of ways that he's afraid. And that humanizes him a bit. That doesn't make him a coward. To be afraid is not a bad thing, but it shows us how his past has traumatized him. But he's able to have mercy on others as long as it serves his best interests. We see that with the Gamorrean guards, even with Fennec by his side saying this is not really a good idea. But he also saved her because he knows she will help him. Even in the flashbacks when he's saving the Massive and the Tusken Raider child from that big giant creature that emerges from underneath the sand, he saves that child, and eventually he gains the trust of the Tusken Raiders. I do want to see, out of mere curiosity, how he gets that weapon, because we see him fighting one of the Tusken Raiders that has that big weapon that he uses in Mando Season 2. I am really enjoying the Godfather vibes that this gives us, but not really as someone who has their power already established. This is someone who is trying to establish themselves. This is someone at the starting point of their career as the quote-unquote Godfather. It mixes a little bit of that with the Western sensibilities that Star Wars, and specifically Mando, where this Boba Fett really came from, originated. So that mix works well, and it's an interesting look and vibe for the entire show. And so I like this episode because of what it shows us from Boba Fett's perspective. We understand his insight a little bit more. But as a whole, as a pilot for a show, it just isn't that exciting. The first bit of flashbacks really drags, because yes, we see him escaping the Sarlacc pit, we see him getting we knew all of this. This is cool things to actually see, but it's actually not really new information. And by the end of the episode, he's holding court, he's getting tributes and presents and gifts from all these people who are here to worship him, because that's all Boba Fett wants. He wants to sit there and for people to
acknowledge me.
He's the tribal chief of Mos Espa of Tattooine, and eventually there's a guy working for the mayor who does not like him and who will not acknowledge him as the big boss of the place. And so eventually he sends some assassins his way that eventually Fennec catches. At least I'm assuming it's from the mayor. Maybe it's something else entirely. And the scene where him and Fennec get ambushed by this group of assassins with the shields and all, to me, it was just very badly executed. Where immediately after that, you jump to the flashback and you have him overpowering this giant creature in the desert, and you sell how much of a fucking badass Boba Fett is. He's like the John Wick of the Star Wars universe. That's what episode 5 in season 2 of Mandalorian sold us on. That's what this moment sells us on. But then he gets beaten, basically, by this group of assassins, of random assassins. And to me, that just went down the wrong way. Where I get that he was in an overpowering position and they had the numbers game and whatnot. But this is Boba fucking Fett. You sell him as the crime lord. He needed to be saved by the Gamorrean guards. And to me, that's not what the show should be conveying by his mercy on the people he wants by his side. We should see that he doesn't need them. He chooses to save them in case he needs them, to his benefit. I just don't think it looks right that he needed to be saved by the Gamorrean guards. I like when the other guy is running away and he shoots him and completely just blows him up and asks Fennec to bring one of them alive. But to me, the fact that he was basically beaten by these assassins, even though, yes, they had the numbers game and whatnot, to me, it just didn't seem right. Where, again, immediately after that, you show him overpowering this one creature by himself with no weapons or anything. It's just not how you sell the badassery of this character who is basically trying to be the godfather of Mos Espa. But this episode very much feels like setup, and come the end of the episode, I just didn't have too much new information over what I did when the episode started. I can enjoy it as a Star Wars fan. I had fun, but I don't think it's very punchy. It's not the most interesting start to this adventure. And I trust that this first episode of the Book of Boba Fett, in the context of the whole show, when it's all said and done and we look back and can binge the first season entirely, it'll make more sense. But seeing this one just in isolation and not having anywhere else to go or anything else to see right now, it's just not the most compelling starting point. I think Temuera Morrison kills it. He's awesome. I love that he has this show for him. And Ming-Na Wen is great as well. The character stuff is all there, but it's very much all a starting point. It feels much more like a presentation. It feels like here's the brochure of the Book of Boba Fett. This entire thing is a premise. By the end, I don't think it launches the show or the story anywhere interesting or compelling. I don't want to come across too negative. This is a solid, entertaining episode of television. I just felt underwhelmed by the events of the episode. Everything just feels like the obvious steps to take, and it doesn't open up the grand scope of where the show is going to go. And I just wanted more of that. I wanted this first episode to be a launching point for the rest of the season, and it feels too much like it did its own thing, looking more to the past, to stuff that we already know, just hadn't actually seen, than eyeing towards the future and to where this show will go eventually. And so those are my thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 1, Stranger in a Strange Land. I want to know your thoughts on it, so go ahead and drop them down in the comments below and start the conversation, because it's always the most important part. And while you're down there, make sure you click that subscribe button if you enjoyed what you see here and want to see every single coverage for every episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Thank you so much once more. I hope to see you in those. And so until the next one, love each other and love the movies.